Hello, everybody. My name is Eric D. Johnson, also known as BrightShine, right here in the city of Memphis. It's in the county of Shelby State, Tennessee. Today and date is early Monday morning, March the 27th, 2023. The time 2 a.m. in the morning. First, I thank all my family, my support for you. Continue to continue to keep myself employed in the Memphis tri-state area. Continue to further my education, more work out online. Continue to pursue my soul degree, studying, being administrative, controlling, market, print time. Took a break and going to school in the very near future. I will be going back to more work out online. Continue to pursue my soul degree, studying, being administrative, controlling, market. Now, what I'm going to do now, I'm going to start my Facebook Live. Hello, everybody. My name is Eric D. Johnson, also known as BrightShine, right here in the city of Memphis, in the county of Shelby State, Tennessee. Today and date is early Monday morning, March the 27th, 2023. Time 2:01 a.m. First, I thank you to my family, my support for you. Continue to support, continue to keep myself employed in the Memphis tri-state area. Continue to further my education, more work out online. Continue to pursue my social future and being administrative content market. The present time, took a break and going to school. In the very near future, I will be going back to more work out online. Continue to pursue my social future and being administrative content market. Now, what you see in front of you, anti-gang, anti-Gnostic, anti-Hazer, also, adversus heresies, translated meaning against heresies. Saint Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyons, together with Saint Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, they wrote a 5-volume book titled Adversus Heresies, translated meaning against heresies, refuting Gnosticism in the first century. Also, Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, in the year 367 AD, in his 39th festal letter, Easter letter, banned all non-Christian writing. Saint Athanasius, Bishop of Alexandria, together with all the other bishops in the Catholic Church, they went around and collected all that Gnostic writing that those Gnostic theologians were writing, and they collected all that Gnostic writing and destroyed it. Some of that Gnostic writing was wrapped in some papyrus paper, put in a jar, and buried in Nagama, Egypt. In 1945, the little farm boy was outside playing, found the Nagama library, gave it to his father, who was a farmer. And eventually the farmer gave what his son had found to the scholars at these colleges and universities around the world. And they took that Nagama library to use to victimize men, women, and children, to destroy nature, the wildlife, and the environment, the North and South Pole. And also, Saint Epiphanius, the bishop, Saint Epiphanius of Salome, the Bishop of Cyprus, wrote a 3-volume book titled Panarium, Greek Panarium, Latin, translated meaning bread basket. Scholars have also said that Saint Epiphanius of Salome, Bishop of Cyprus, 3-volume book is also adversus heresies, meaning it's against heresies. Rejecting knowledge. Rejecting knowledge. Rejecting knowledge. Rejecting knowledge. The Almighty, Vice Lord, Four Corner Hustle. The Almighty, Black Prince Stone. The Almighty, Black Disciple, Poppin'. The Almighty, Mickey Cobra, Cracker. The Almighty Bluefin, Black Disciple. The Black Disciple. The Lord, Stone, Disciple. 7-Eleven, G Killer. Gangster Disciple Killer. See, this is the history of the city of Chicago. See, the history of the city of Chicago. It's important. Serious. Because see, everyday people. On my previous video, we talk about the Catholic Church. We talk about the Catholic Church. Roman Catholic Church. Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church. Oriental Orthodox Catholic Church. In the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago, and surrounding states. The Roman Catholic Church, the Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church, the Oriental Orthodox Catholic Church in the state of Illinois, in the city of Chicago, and the surrounding states, around the United States of America, around the world. And it's been that way for many, many years. Many, many years. So in the history of the city of Chicago, the Catholic Church. In the state of Illinois, the Catholic Church. In the surrounding states. In the United States of America, the Catholic Church. Now, people that's trying to be Christian, trying to be a Catholic. It's important, the history of the city of Chicago, because that is part of the history of the city of Chicago, the Catholic, and the state of Illinois, and the United States history, world history. the Catholic Church. It's important. It's very important. The history of the city of Chicago. Now, that's my daddy, Chester Johnson Jr., and he passed away in 2012. And that's my mother, Annabelle Johnson, and she just recently passed this year in the month of January, 2023. And love and miss my mom, and I love and miss my dad. And that's my dad's little brother, my Uncle Lemuel Johnson. While I was incarcerated, he was murdered. And I don't never forget, and I damn sure don't forget. And I don't take. And when it comes to this history of the city of Chicago, see, on my dad and my mom's side, my granddad and my grandma, dad on my dad's side from Mississippi, and my mama's side from Mississippi. You see, on my dad's side, my grandma, my granddad were living right here in the city of Memphis. After he left Mississippi, were living right here in the city of Memphis. My dad was born right here in the city of Memphis. And then my Uncle Lemuel, he was the second oldest of grandmama and granddad's children. And see, granddad, he moved to Detroit, Michigan. Worked at a Ford Motor Company, retired, and lived in Detroit, Michigan till the day he passed away. Grandma, she had another son, Uncle Walter. You see, he lived in the city of Chicago up until the day he passed away. And grandmama had a daughter on Virgin May, and she was living in the city of Chicago up until the day she passed away. And grandma had a son, James Demo. He was living in Mississippi up until the day he passed away. And grandmama had another son, my Uncle Burley Jr., living in the city of Chicago up until the day he passed away. And grandmama, she was living in Chicago when she passed away. See, the history of the city of Chicago right there in front of you. The history of the city of Chicago is right there in front of you. It's in front of you. You see, my mom, she was the youngest of all my granddad and grandmama's children. But see, it ain't no different. See, all these people that were moving and living in the city of Chicago, it was the same thing. Talking about people living in Chicago, moving to Chicago and all this. See, the history of the city of Chicago is sitting right there in front of you. So, the history of the city of Chicago is important. People make choices and decisions. You know, and it's important. Just like world history, American history, the city of Chicago, it's important. Because that is American history. That is world history. It's important. See, one thing I want to point out, how important it is to not forget the 1945 discovery of the Nag-Hammadi Library. See, that's the reason why it's so important history. When you talk about Gnosticism, always remember that the only recorded history of Gnosticism, because Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, and all the other bishops of the Catholic Church, they destroyed the majority of all that Gnostic rite was destroyed. So the only recorded history of Gnosticism was and versus heresies, against heresies. The book that Saint Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyon, together with Saint Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch. That's the only, at that time, that was the only recorded record of Gnosticism. So whatever somebody tried to say about Gnosticism, Gnosticism was already refuted by the Catholic Church in the 1st century. So when they discovered that Nag-Hammadi Library in 1945, things changed, because the so-called scholars in academia at the colleges and universities around the world, they took that Nag-Hammadi Library to use and misuse, to victimize men, women, and children, to destroy wildlife, nature, and the environment, to destroy the North and South Pole, and everything else. So when we talk about the history of the city of Chicago, the history of the state of Illinois, that's important. I was just taking a little reading of something about the history. Just a quick glance. See, don't never leave out the discovery of the Nag-Hammadi Library. Always remember that was a key change around the world. That changed a lot around the world. Let me scroll back up just to mention something I want to mention. Now, just a quick glance, just because I don't want you to leave out the Nag-Hammadi Library. The discovery of the Nag-Hammadi Library in 1945. Don't never leave that out the history of the world, of America, of the state of Illinois, city of Chicago. It's important. I just want quick, just now. I'm over here on Chicago gang history. No matter who do the writing, the history gonna still be history. But it just, this is the reason why I'm reading it, because I don't want you to leave out the 1945 discovery of the Nag-Hammadi Library. Now, I'm gonna read something real quick. Now it says here, many say the vice lords have origins that date all the way back to the 1940s. However, it said this does not mean any part of the nation was founded back in the 40s. It just means that members of older gangs ended up flipping to vice lords in later years, and that many of the goals of the older gangs intertwined with the development of the almighty vice lord nation. Now, the oldest significant black street gangs in Chicago were the Dirty Sheiks and the Wailing Sheiks that date back to deep into the early 20th century. before the year 1927 on the south side of Chicago. These two gangs often acted as syndicates and fought against other black gangs or even white gangs. In the early 1940s, the Sheiks and the Shebas had migrated to the Maxwell Street Market area of the near West Side neighborhood to assist newly arrived black Southerners facing terrible discrimination as they settled along Halsted Street. See, we talking about the 1940s. It said beginning in the early 1940s, new surge of black migration came to Chicago as the war industry opened up several jobs for Americans in the southern United States. Jobs was a lot scarce for black families, and many were still living in extreme poverty without many essentials like plumbing, adequate housing, or even clean water to drink at times. Everywhere in the United States, there was racism and hatred towards blacks, but in the South, it was much more obvious as there were actual laws that explicitly commanded that blacks should remain segregated. Employers could legally discriminate against hiring blacks, and many Jim Crow laws even forbid blacks from owning their own property. This forced many blacks to work in jobs that whites didn't want because of the very low pay and harsh working conditions. Blacks also often had to rent from slumlords that legally could neglect property and leave living conditions in shambles. There was not much representation for the black community in these years, but there was plenty of representation for the white Southerners in favor of these harsh treatments, including the Ku Klux Klan that often roamed through shantytowns that blacks lived in and enforced these Jim Crow laws harshly. Blacks had been migrating from the South to Chicago since the 1860s. But there was not much of a call for blacks to take the risk and travel up to Chicago until the Chicago Defender newspaper began sending issues of their paper down south, informing black families about the success that some black families experienced after moving. The paper began circulation in 1916 and sparked the third wave of black migration, which also became the first big wave as families got settled and some reported a better life in the 1920s. It brought more families until a lull happened in the 1930s during the Great Depression. Now, like I said, don't never forget the discovery of the Nagamon Library in 1945. Because see, during this time, it wasn't nothing like what you talking about Gnosticism. You see what I'm talking about? See, when you talking about all these blacks migrating and all this, see, it wasn't nobody trying to go around trying to influence people to listen to no Nagamon Library, to no Gnosticism in that way. Because the only recorded history of Gnosticism was at versus Heresies. And it is today, as it is today. At versus Heresies, against heresies. Because the Catholic Church had destroyed all that Gnostic writing in the first century. Had refuted Gnosticism in the first century. And then St. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, together with all the other bishops in the Catholic Church in the 3rd century. They collected all that Gnostic writing from them Gnostic theologians and destroyed it. So it wasn't no literature. It wasn't no information for you to go and look at and say you're going to be a Gnostic. No, it wasn't, because the Catholic Church, they destroyed that Gnostic writing. Then in 1945, a few copies of that Gnostic writing that them Gnostic theologians had been writing, somebody put a few copies in some wrapped it in some paper paper and put it in a jar and buried it in Nagamon, Egypt. Then the little farm boy in 1945, he was outside playing. And he found it. And he gave what he found to his father, who was a farmer. And eventually, the scholars at the colleges and universities around the world, in academia, they found out about it. And after they found out about it, eventually, they took that information to use, to abuse, to victimize men, women, children, to destroy wildlife, to destroy nature, to destroy the environment, to destroy the North Pole, South Pole, and everything else. So like I said, this little information on, what's this? ChicagoGangHistory.com. Anybody can write about his history. You know, I can sit here and rewrite the same thing and tell you the same thing in another different way, and it will still be talking about the history of shit. So it don't matter. But that's the one thing we want to never leave out. See, during this period when we were talking about the migration to Chicago, it wasn't no Nagma library. It wasn't no Nagma library, and it wasn't no talking about going around trying to tell. I tell you what, they were going around talking about Freemasonry and talking about that Eastern Star mix. That's what they were talking about. If somebody mentioned something about some nonsense, see, it wasn't no literature. So if the white people were going around the black / African American, the only information recorded was versus heresies, against heresies, to talk about Gnosticism. But the thing we want to look at is the change that came about. See, remember, all these black / African Americans living here in America, all this Jim Crow, all this people were coming up to Chicago, to the state of Illinois and the surrounding states. It wasn't no big thing about no. And then see, eventually there was a change, World War II, and all this. It says here, I don't know the whole story, but eventually members of the Dirty Sheiks and the Wailing Shebas created the Imperial Chaplains in the 14th Street Clovers along Halstead Street by the late 1940s or early 1950s. And then in 1951, so let me stop right there. The Nagma Library, discovery, 1945. 1945. Remember, this is important because the Dirty Sheiks and the Wailing Shebas, they created the Imperial Chaplains in the 14th Street Clovers along Halstead Street by the late 1940s or early 1950s. So the Nagma Library had been discovered. So now you got some so-called literature for this Nazi stuff. So in 1951, the Clovers and the Chaplains migrated to North Lawndale, but were not big-time gangbanging groups until 1954. So again, pay attention. The discovery of the Nagma Library, 1945. Then in 1951, the Clovers and the Chaplains migrated to North Lawndale, but were not big-time gangbang group until 1954, when the North Lawndale and near West Side neighborhoods began to set off with several fist-fighting gangs as territory was now being set. Both these gangs would take over these neighborhoods as the big outfits in the community as the Sheiks and Shebas ended. So that time period, when the discovery of the Nagma Library, 1945, then in 1951, the Clovers and the Chaplains migrated to North Lawndale. At first, see, the Sheiks and the Shebas, they really weren't into no gang banging. It might have been some street hustling going on. As they called it, the black syndicates. Some street hustling was going on. Some crap games, some illegal gambling going on. Street hustling. That's basically what it was. Street hustling. Just street hustling. Yeah, being black, talking about getting a job or something. See, it was some street hustling going on. But there wasn't no gang banging like you talking about. Us versus them and them versus us. No, it wasn't none of that. Most of street hustling. See, all this stuff about some gang banging, see, you see where it's coming from. The Nagmine Library. 1945 discovery of the Nagmine Library, talking about some Gnosticism. Now you talking about some literature. And see, the older gangs, they just got swept up. They became part of the vice lords, the older guys. But I ain't gonna go too far. But the point I wanted to make, that point, that's the point I wanted to make about this Nagmine Library. See, sometimes, and a lot of times, the truth gets suppressed. That's what that is. You suppress the truth. And that's what's being done. People don't admit, they don't tell the truth. They lie. See, it's very important that you include the discovery of the Nagmine Library and how people's choices and decisions are influenced by this Gnostic literature. Because see, all it is a bunch of lies anyway. They take the truth and distort it. They take any information and distort it. And so, that's the point I wanted to make. Don't leave out the Nagmine Library. The discovery of the Nagmine Library is very important. Don't suppress the truth. Expose, those are the culprits. Expose the culprits. Because we have to remember, when you hear me talk about the name, just put this in your mind. Just put this thought in your mind. 1945, discovering the name. Then what that mean for all these white / European Americans? You have to put this in your mind that it was discovered in 1945. If it hadn't been discovered yet, and the only recorded record of Gnosticism is adversus heresies against heresies. That's the only recorded record of Gnosticism. Is what the Catholic Church had done. It refuted Gnosticism in the 1st century. Adversus heresies against heresies. So for all these white / European Americans, when you talk about Gnosticism had been refuted, proven to be a heresy. And it don't change just because no Nagmine Library. It's still the same information, Still talking about Gnosticism, so it don't mean anything. It's been refuted. It's a heresy. It don't change nothing. It's still a heresy. So the history of the city of Chicago, see, that's important. See, the truth is being suppressed. The truth is being suppressed. And see, just like I've been emphasizing, that it's important. The conservative vice lords and all the factions, like traveling vice lord, unknown vice lord, renegade vice lord, imperial insane vice lord, mafia insane vice lord, Cicero insane vice lord, Central insane vice lord, executioner insane vice lord, Spanish vice lord, Undertaker vice lord, all the vice lords, all vice lords, it's important that when you teach the history, you teach it, see, there's something that gets left out. It gets left out. And then when you talk about the black Prince stones, see, when you talk about the imperial chaplains and the clovers, it means just as much to the black Prince stone as it does to the vice lord. When you talk about before 1940, just like that information I just read, talking about blacks migrating from the south. It's a lot of people that means just as much to the vice lord, to the black Prince stones as it do to the vice lord. Because that's where their families came from the deep south, from Alabama, from Louisiana, from Tennessee, Mississippi, Arkansas, Texas, Oklahoma, Kentucky, Missouri. That's where they came from. This big migration from the south, trying to escape Jim Crow in the south. World War I, World War II. See, it's important. Talking about the dirty sheiks and the wailing sheepers. It's important. The so-called syndicate, the black syndicate and all that, street hustling. Because that's all it was, street hustling. See, it wasn't no such thing as gangbanging. If anybody was killing anybody, it was because street hustling. That's all it was, street hustling. If it was some dope being sold, street hustling. Pimps, prostitutes, gambling houses, shooting craps on the corner, so on and so forth. Street hustling. But see, it means just as much to the black disciples. Black Princeton, black disciples. It means the same thing. The history of the city of Chicago. Because when you talk about the vice lord, just like we just got to read, the chaplains and the clovers. It means just as much to the black Princeton. It means just as much to the black disciple. The vice lord history. It means just as much to them. Then you have the mad black soul and Latin soul. When you talk about the history of the vice lord, it means the same thing. The boss pimps is going to mean the same thing. Talking about the dirty sheiks and the wailing sheepers. And then by the time the 1940s, some of them older guys, then you start talking about all these athletic clubs. See, it means just as much to them as it do to the vice lord. See, it means the same thing. It means the same thing. And then all these white guys and then all these Hispanic, Latino, it's going to mean the same thing. It's going to mean the same thing. It ain't going to change. See, you can't get around it. See? You can't get around it. But see, it's one thing you leave out. You leave out the discovery of the 1945 discovery of the Nagmar Library. See, when you see 1951, then you start seeing the clovers and the chaplains fist fighting. See, it wasn't nothing like that before the 1945 discovery of the Nagmar Library. Street hustling, of course, yeah, street hustling. But see, that's the key thing. See, when you start talking about that Nagmar Library, talking about some Gnostic literature, then things change. Then you see a change. See, that's what's important. Don't forget the discovery of the 1945 discovery of the Nagmar Library. Because it was a change. That what made a change. A definite change. Not only in Chicago, and not only here in America, but around the world. See, people take that Nagmar Library and they don't do nothing but try to be destructive. That's all they do. Be destructive. Based on lies. Because that's all it is. Lies. That's all the Gnostic is, a liar. That's all you're doing, lying. That's all you're doing, lying. You see, the Catholic Church. The Catholic Church had already refuted Gnosticism in the first century and versus heresies against heresies. Saint Irenaeus, the Bishop of Lyons, together with Saint Ignatius, the Bishop of Antioch, 5-volume book, refuted Gnosticism in the first century. And then in the 3rd century, Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, together with all the other bishops of the Catholic Church. They went around and collected all that Gnostic writing and destroyed it. And see, it's important. It's important that you know the history. Because see, once they destroyed, there was no record of Gnosticism except in versus heresies against heresies. That was the only record. Or not, when they say they destroyed, that's what they did. That's what the Catholic Church did. They literally, they went around and collected all that Gnostic writing and destroyed it. The only recorded record of Gnosticism is versus heresies against heresies. So when anybody says something about Gnosticism, you had to refer to and versus heresies against heresies. Because it's a heresy. It's a heresy. And so, the history of the city of Chicago, that's really why it's important. When you look at history, you see that it was important. The discovery of the Nagmar Library, that's important to include in history. Because you see a change. And you had to be able to see the change. See, when I see it, I know what I'm seeing. I'm seeing Gnosticism. The Nagmar Library, that's really what I'm seeing. People going around lying. It's wrong. Just like I've been saying all the time. Ain't no need to worry about that no more. It's over. See, the conservative vice lord and all the factions, you ain't got to worry about that no more. Black Prince, ain't got to worry about that no more. Because, see, that's the reason why I took the time to do what I did. You ain't got to worry about it. I already know what you was doing. The sorority and the fraternity going around the line. Going around the line. See, the black disciples, they ain't got to worry about it. Satan disciples, they ain't got to worry about it. They ain't got to worry about it. You ain't got to never worry about no Gnosticism. The maniac Latin disciples, they ain't got to worry about it. And all them other, folks, all the other Hispanic Latinos, they ain't got to worry about no name on Liberia. You ain't got to worry about it. Then you got all of my people, 12th Street players, and then basically all the white gangs, the Jousters and Shy West and the Almighty Gaylords and the Simon City Royals. See, it's just true. You ain't got to worry about it. You ain't got to be going around worrying about no name on Liberia, talking about no Gnosticism. The Catholic Church already refuted Gnosticism in the first century. What you worried about it for? What you going around worried about something like that for? The Catholic Church already refuted Gnosticism for. Then St. Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, and all the other bishops in the Catholic Church, they went around and collected. They being realistic, they actually went around wherever they found that Gnostic writing, whoever was doing it, whoever these Gnostic theologians, they went around and took it. They collected it. They weren't worried about nobody getting mad, getting no weapons. They didn't care. They went around and collected all that Gnostic writing and destroyed it. And wasn't losing no sleep at night, wasn't worried about nobody. Period. They went around and collected all that Gnostic writing and destroyed it. So it ain't no need you worrying about it. Because with that Nagamon library, all that is some Gnostic writing that didn't get destroyed. That's all it is. It's still gonna be it's still a heresy. It's already been refuted. It's a heresy. So it ain't no need you worrying about it. Ain't no need you worrying about it, because the only thing you're doing is just lying. You just lying. But I mean, if you want to put yourself in jeopardy, then that's on you. I mean, you saying, I know what you're saying. You figure that all these black / African Americans, these so-called African people, these Niger Congo people, who've been enslaved, who've been oppressed, who, still being oppressed, still being considered to be slaves. Been denied education. So that's what you're going to do. You're going to take it like, well, I know these dumbass niggas, so I'm just going to go around. Well, I mean, see, this is the reason why I've been reminded the CV, conservative vice lord and the faction. See, when the white people / European people, when they be around each other, see, all this stuff we was talking about, this reject. See, they be around each other. They'll sit around talking about they're pagan. And then all this other junk, Freemasonry, they're Mason and Shriner and the Eastern Star. Then you got some of them talking about some Hermetism, what they call it, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. There's some of them walking around now. This ain't just something in the past. We talking about today. It's some people probably walking around, some white people walking around right now talking about some Neoplaton. Right now. And then there's some of them walking around talking about they some Gnostics. Just like you, and then talking about the occult. The New Age. Right now, today, in the present, not just in the past. Right now, in the present. And what's the other one? Theosophy. The Theosophical Society. And then on the other side, the Anthroposophical. Anthroposophical. Right now, today. What in the United States of America, you got freedom of religion. Freedom of religion. And then around the world, the United Nations. You know, it's one thing, it's very rare. Now, I'm not saying that it ain't, but you know what's very rare? It's very rare you see some white / European American talking about damn Muslim. It's very rare. I mean, it's probably, I know I haven't seen some. But I mean, it's very rare. I'm talking about very rare. Talking about some Islam, you know. So, I mean, you know, when it come down to it, I mean, you know, things like that, you know, make a difference. It do. And like I said again, you know, like pagan, and then natural religion and all, you know, all that kind of, you know. But we talking about the white / European American, because you want to deny education. So when we talking about the discovering the name out library, see, this what the Nazis did. They just imposed, you know, they just, if it's some kind of group, they gonna just get right in. Anytime you say something about God, they gonna just sit right there. You know, they gonna just include themselves. See, this is the reason why Saint Athanasius, the Bishop of Alexandria, and the rest of the bishops in the Catholic Church, they did what they did in 367 AD. They went around and collected all their knots, and they banned all non-Christian writing from the church service. No, you weren't gonna sit in. No, you weren't gonna sit in. Cause we already, you know, Nazism already been refuted, and so you just gonna steal. No, absolutely not. I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna take all this Nazi right and we're gonna destroy it, and we're gonna ban all non-Christian writing from the church service. So you can get up out of here. Get up out of here. See, it's important that you include Gnosticism in the history of the city of Chicago. See, it's important. Because, see, it was a change. It was a change. It was a change. It was a negative change. See, it wasn't no issue about people because you had oppressed people, black / African Americans, coming from different states, different cities, all converging on this one area, the city of Chicago, the state of Illinois. And then you had other states in the north where you had all this industrialization going on. And then all this agricultural industry in the south. But then you had all the manufacturing industry in the northern states. In the Midwest, Wisconsin and Minnesota and the state of Michigan, Indianapolis. There was a lot of industrialization. The state of Illinois had a lot of factories and stuff. So this draw a lot of black / African Americans to these northern cities, to these northern states. The state of Iowa. But see, before 1945, discovered the Nagama Library. See, that's what makes a difference. See, there was a lot of people talking about Freemasonry and the Eastern Stars, the Shriners, of course. Then you had a lot, you had people that were doing a lot of talking about the occult, voodoo. Just like your black exploitation movies. They keep mentioning in those movies about the occult, voodoo, black magic and all this kind of, this stuff. Shintoria. See? But do you hear about that today? No, you don't hear that stuff today. You don't even hear nothing about that today. There ain't nobody paying no attention to no Shintoria. Ain't no voodoo. Ain't nobody. They don't do that no more. They don't. But you know what you notice? If you see all these black / African Americans who've been undereducated, miseducated, what is it that you learn that's different? Because there was a period of time when that stuff was important. Now, you can't. Like you done learn something new, and you just know that ain't right. You just know that ain't right. See, the discovery of the Nagama Library, and see all them sororities and fraternities were going around in the black community, in the African American community, lying. That what changed. That what brought about a change. So it's important to know the history of the city of Chicago. But when you know the history of Chicago, or the city of Chicago, and the state of Illinois, American history, world history, include the discovery of the Nagama Library. And I guarantee you, when you go all around the world, you see all these events. Look at before the discovery of the Nagama Library, and then look at after the discovery of the Nagama Library. I guarantee you'll see a change. I guarantee you. Because like I said, it's important when you talk about the history of the city of Chicago, see, and when you just talk about world history, it's important. Include the discovery of the Naggamon Library and point out what people do. This Naggamon Library, their behavior. It's important. Expose the culprits. Expose. Because see, that's what they think they can do. They think they can go around and be destructive. And it's been time to say, no. You don't, no. That's not the right thing to do. First of all, you got to acknowledge and recognize the Catholic Church. You got to acknowledge and recognize the Catholic Church and the right that the Catholic Church has been trying to do and trying to do. You spend umpteen hundred hours trying to broadcast, claiming that some clergyman, or not just male clergy, but just clergy and male and female, somebody in the Catholic Church committing some kind of crime. Committing some kind of crime against children or something else or some kind of other offense. Which, things, some crime being committed, the public wants to know. The Catholic Church should be acknowledged. The Catholic Church should be recognized. For all the good that the Catholic Church does. Because I can watch world news, local news. You don't see the Catholic Church being acknowledged. You don't see the Catholic Church being recognized for the good that the Catholic Church does each and every day. You don't talk about how the bishops and the deacons trying to do good in the community. But you take just a few who falling short. And then you try to paint this negative portrayal of the Catholic Church. You want to talk about a bishop victimize a child. A bishop. Well, when it comes from, from a press, freedom of the press. The community want to know something like that happen. But do you ever hear the news? Do you ever hear the press report the good that the bishop and the deacon do each and every day? No. Do you hear? Do you see the nuns each and every day doing good in the community? Do you hear about it? No. You don't hear about it. But you want to talk about, you want to report, which is freedom of the press. The public has a, what they say, the public has a right to know. Okay. A bishop or a person who supposedly is in the Catholic Church committed some kind of offense, some kind of crime, and some kind of sexual crime, and it had to be a child. It gets broadcast. Now, that's not the issue I'm making. The issue I want to make is this. Now, you want to talk about one, and then they claim, the news media say, okay, there were some cases where not just one, but there were some cases where more than one person in the Catholic Church committed crimes against children, or just committed crime, period. And while you was reporting that, did you report the good that the bishop and the deacons and the nuns do each and every day? No. Don't the public got a right to know that? Don't the public got a right to see that the Catholic Church, the bishops and the deacons and the nuns and the Catholic Church in general, Roman Catholic Church, Eastern Orthodox Catholic Church, Oriental Orthodox Catholic Church, doing good every day? Look at all these schools right here in the city of Memphis. Look at the Catholic schools right here in the city of Memphis, educating children every day. Do they get acknowledged? Do they get recognized? No. How many young children graduate from high school, from a Catholic school every year? Do the Catholic Church get acknowledged? Do the Catholic Church get recognized for the good that the Catholic Church do? No. Yeah, you don't hear nothing. You don't hear anything about the good that the Catholic Church does. Trying to help the homeless. Trying to help dealing with the migrants coming across the border. Trying to help the homeless. See, you don't hear that being reported. You don't hear that being reported. And that's not a good thing to be talking about. That's not a good thing to say. That's not a good thing to say. That the Catholic churches are not being acknowledged. The Catholic churches are not being recognized for the good that the Catholic Church does every day in the community. Every day. You got people with alcohol problems, substance abuse problems, all kind of social problems the Catholic Church does not get acknowledged. The Catholic Church does not get recognized for the good that the Catholic Church does in the community. And so it's important that you include in your discussion, your conversation about history, world history, American history, the history of the city of Chicago, include the discovery of the Nagamon Library before and after. It's important because I guarantee you're going to notice a difference. See, some people, you just don't want to tell the truth because you're one of them people that's trying to be destructive. Person like me, I'm exposing the culprits. See, I'm exposing the culprits. I'm making sure. They around here, the sorority fraternity, they going around talking about, they use the Nagamon Library, talking about some Gnosticism. It ain't just the sororities and the fraternity. It's people, in academia in general, around the world, trying to use the Nagamon Library to victimize men, women, and children, to destroy wildlife, nature, the environment, trying to destroy the North and South Pole. You just want to be destructive. It ain't no do them to get you in a lot of trouble. So, and then, we talking about the Nazis and things like this, just like I've been saying about this, the demiurge. The Nazis call themselves talking about the material world. It's even talking about this clumsy God. But see, you can't leave out the fact that the Neoplatonists, Plato, who was a student of Socrates. When we talk about this, we talking about before the first century. We talking what they call it BC, before Christ, and then we talking about AD, after death. So we talking about BC, before Christ. Socrates. The stuff you talking about, that's what they was talking about then. Yeah, that's what they was talking about. The same thing you talking about, the demiurge, God. That's what they was talking about. Philosophy. Then Plato. And then Plato had students. Excuse me. For example, Aristotle, who was a student of Plato. And Aristotle wasn't the only student of Plato. But, the Neoplatonists, Platonism and Neoplatonism. The book that Plato wrote, the Timaeus, talking about the demiurge. And what did they say about the demiurge? The demiurge was a benevolent God and desired that the world be good. The so-called Gnostics, they took that information and distorted it. Talking about what did they say? Who did they talk about? The demiurge. Was a clumsy God. And that the material world was evil. See, the only thing you did was took information from the Neoplaton and twisted it, distorted it. So make sure that's the reason why I wanted you to catch on to what I was, the point I was making about this discovery of the Nagma library. See, this is what they talking about. They talking about the demiurge. When you talk about Gnostics, you're not talking about you trying to claim that God is the demiurge. Well, don't leave out what the Neoplaton said, first of all. The Neoplaton said that the demiurge was a benevolent God and desired a world that was good. The demiurge. They took the same word, name for God, demiurge, turned it around, twisted it, distorted it, and said that God, demiurge, was a clumsy God. And that the material world was evil. You lying. That's a lie. Then, when we started talking about the church, the Jewish Christians, the church, Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Well, see, that's not no demiurge. That's something different. And so what did the Gnostics try to do? They tried to take the Bible. They tried to take the Holy Bible and tried to take verses out this Bible and do the same thing, distort it. They try to take our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Son of God, and change who, what, where, when, how, and changed it. They took the Holy Spirit, did the same thing. They did the same thing. It took not only Jesus, but took our Holy Father, our Heavenly Father, and took and changed it. See, it ain't just about the demiurge no more. When it comes to the church, see, you have to catch on to what they do. All they do is take information and distort it. They just take information and distort it. And go around trying to use violence to persuade people. All right. Now, see, it's important that you point these things out. People being persuaded by this Gnostic stuff, they use violence to persuade people. Because, see, you have to always remember, you got groups of people who try to oppress each other. For example, white/Europeans from Western Europe trying to oppress, trying to enslave the Niger Congo. trying to enslave and oppress the Niger Congo by using violence. You know, they had to go from the sword and the spears to the gunpowder and guns. In order to conquer, to subdue, to subjugate another group of people. Well, you got to have some powerful weapons. And that's basically what it is, to use violence. Because no one is going to listen to what you got to say. So the only way you can persuade someone, use violence. It's a historical fact. Everywhere you go, people resist. You meet resistance. People don't listen to nonsense like you think. You try to make it sound like people no, they don't. Because like I told you, the Catholic Church. How many people around the world, the most populous religion on the earth, on this earth, the Catholic Church. Billions of people on God's green earth. Catholic. Christian. You haven't persuaded anybody. Only thing you done, tried to use violence in certain places around the world where you think you can get an advantage. With weapons, with gunpowder and guns. But even now, even today, resistance. You meet resistance. Because when you try to use violence, people be violent with you. They resist. People resist. It's a historical fact. People resist. They fight back. So what you try to do? You try to outnumber them and outgun them. I guarantee there'll be people around the world, they'll say, look at the African Americans. Look at the black / African Americans. How many, 40 million? And then how many white / European Americans? 100 million? 200 million? What's the population of the United States of America? What? 300 million? Ain't 300 million? And out of that 300 million, what they say, we as black / African, we only 12% of the population, of the total population of America. So we outnumbered and outgunned. Outnumbered and outgunned. Do that mean that it's right? Some kind of Gnostic? No, they don't mean right. You just outnumbered and outgunned a group of people. That's all it means. But they ain't gonna, if you go into a classroom and talk about what you talking about, and I'm sitting there, you ain't gonna be right. Because that's what y'all do to each other. Y'all force each other. They do the same thing. They outnumber each other and they outgun each other. Then what they do? When you try to outnumber and outgun each other, what they do? See, you got one of them, you got one side trying to use violence, then what happens? The same thing. The ones that's being outnumbered and outgunned, they be violent with them. They fight back. They resist. See, you don't never point these things out that you still haven't gotten, you haven't proved anything being right. You haven't refuted. But that's what the Catholic Church did to Gnosticism. They refuted, and Neoplatonism and the Hermetic order, Hermetism, refuted by the Catholic Church. Already been refuted. Freemasonry, Eastern Star, Shriners, already been refuted by the Catholic Church. Already been refuted by the Catholic Church. So, it's important. That's the reason why I do the things I do. Is to make sure that that stuff you talking about ain't nothing to be worried about. And talking about you gonna outnumber me and outgun me, well, it's gonna still be the same thing. You know, you try to use violence, and I'm gonna try, and I'm gonna be violent. And you're gonna try to outnumber me, you know. And you're going to try to use violence, then I'm going to be violent. It's that's how it's going to be. That's all I can say. All it's going to be. Violence beget violence. Violence leads to violence. That's what it's going to be. And I'm still saying the same thing, you know, look. You don't acknowledge and recognize the Catholic Church for the good that the Catholic Church does. I just can't get that out of my mind. And while I've been sitting there, it's been in my mind. It's been sticking in my mind. I'm like, you know, I'm right. You know, that's right. But, you know, the Catholic Church do so much that's good in the community. They do. The Catholic Church do a lot of good in the community. Every day. I just can't get this thought in my mind. All the Catholic schools in America. In the community. All the Catholic schools. And I'm just sitting there, I'm like, and then you got Catholic charities. And the Catholic Church don't never get acknowledged, don't never get recognized for the good that the Catholic Church does every day. Every day. And I don't think that's right. I don't think it's right. I think that's wrong. I really do. I think that's wrong. Now, what time? Yeah. Let me find me a newspaper. Okay, I'm the war in Ukraine. The war in Ukraine. As you know, they've been advertising. You know, they've been broadcasting. It's been a year. The war in Ukraine been a year now. So I'm looking at a newspaper. You know not to listen to Fox. You know not to listen to CNN and Fox. You already know that. Don't listen to CNN and Fox. You're going to get misled. I'm telling you. Don't listen. The sororities and fraternities, they lie all day, every day. They lie. You see what they talking about now? Trump. That's all they talking about, Trump. And what else? And when they talk about Trump, what they talking about? They talking about he done gave some money because he had, you know, some kind of stuff with some woman. And that's all that's in the news. He not even, you know, he trying to run for president again, and all they talking about is him getting money to keep it quiet. That he had some kind of sexual stuff with a woman that he wasn't married to. That's big news. That's big news. Well, I think the other bigger news is the weather. Is that like right here in this tri-state area, it was a tornado. There was some tornadoes. We had some bad weather. And I be honest with you, I know, because when I got off work on Friday, this past Friday, soon as I got to the house, because I was out about in Friday evening. And so by the time I made it to the house, came in, and I guarantee you, around about 7 o'clock, it was pouring down raining, and I kind of looked out the window a little bit, and I could just see that there was some kind of bad weather. Then on the TV, it was reporting bad weather, tornado watch. And sure enough, that's what happened. It was a tornado. Not just one, I think it was more than one. But some areas were worse off than the others. But, I mean, you know, that was the other big news, the weather. But on CNN and Fox, as well as the local, you know, CBS, ABC, NBC, and then you got the local Fox station, you know, the local Fox station, and the CW, because they have local news. The big news, Trump. And his hush, you know, the money he tried to pay because some extramarital sexual stuff. And that's the big news. That's the big news. He's going to get indicted for that. And some more Trump news about some secret documents. So that's the big news. That's the big news. But I'm reading one of these Russian newspapers when it comes to the Ukrainian war, because the weather is important. That's the most important thing about this whole thing is the weather. You fighting the war, the most important thing, the weather. So there's one newspaper I'm looking at. See, it ain't gonna make no difference. It can be any newspaper coming from Russia, or any type of newspaper you find outside the United States of America. But one newspaper, the Moscow Times. It don't matter, as long as it's a newspaper outside the United States of America, because news is news. me see. The war in Ukraine. Now, this is the Moscow Times. The war in Ukraine. Let me see here. See, March 20. Okay, let me see what this gonna say here. Now, I'm gonna read this article. See, this is one of the what's it? I'm still reading the Moscow Times, but it says Ukraine says managing to stabilize the battle for Bakhmut. But Kyiv said its forces were managing to stabilize the situation around Bakhmut and now destroy a city in eastern Ukraine that has seen the longest battle of the Russian invasion. Bakhmut, which once had an estimated population of around 70,000 people, has been virtually empty of civilians over months of fierce fighting between Russian and Ukrainian forces. The frontline situation is the toughest in the battle in the Bakhmut direction. The head of Ukraine's armed forces, Valery Zaluzny, said late Friday after a phone call with Britain's chief of the defense staff, Admiral Sir Tony Berdakin. Said due to the tremendous efforts of the defense forces, we are managed to stabilize the situation, Zaluzny said on Facebook. Said Russian forces have been posting painstakingly incremental gains around the city whose symbolic importance surpassed any military significance as the battle dragged on. It said, according to the British Defense Ministry, latest intelligence update on Saturday, Russia's assault on Bakhmut has largely stalled. This is likely primary result of extreme attrition of the Russian force, the British statement read, adding that in the battle Ukraine had also suffered heavy casualties. What have I been saying from the beginning? Inflict casualties on the Ukrainian military. Inflict casualties. And so as you can see, in the battle for Ukraine, in the battle for Bakhmut, what has been happening? The Ukrainians have suffered heavy casualties. Senior Ukrainian military commander Alexander Syrsky said Thursday a counterattack could be launched soon against exhausted Russian forces near Bakhmut. How you gonna launch a counteroffensive and you suffering heavy casualties? That's senseless. Then there's gonna be some more casualties. Anyway, Circuit statements came a day after Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky announced that he had visited Ukraine for near the Bakhmut front line when the head of Russia's Wagner mercenary group, Yevgeny Prigozhin, said Monday that his forces were in control of around 70% of the city. Okay, that's an old article. So, like I said, that was just one newspaper, the Moscow Times, the war in Ukraine. Like I said, hey, the most important thing, the weather. And like I've been saying ever since I've been talking about the Ukraine war, is inflict casualties on the Ukrainian military. And as you can see, they sitting up here fighting in Bakhmut. Not saying that's the only location, because as you can see, there are other places in eastern Ukraine where all this heavy fighting is going on. You know, and you don't hear about these things. You know, and so, and as you can see, it's reported they suffering heavy casualties. Heavy casualties. Okay, so I just glanced over at this other newspaper, Pravda. Now let me click back over. Alright, let me click back over. Alright, let's go on over here to the TASS Russian News Agency. Alright. And so, like I said, I'm reading the TASS Russian News Agency. I'm just glancing at some of the military operation in Ukraine. Don't see too much of a big difference. That's the point. And see, like I said, don't listen to CNN and Fox, because when you read the Russian TASS News, you seeing all these casualties, and you also seeing weapons being destroyed. Like, for instance, those American weapons that the American taxpayers are sending, those weapons are being destroyed. So basically, military operation in Ukraine. So like I said, I'm reading the TASS Russian News Agency. I don't see too much of a big difference. You can read any Russian newspaper and you will see, don't listen to CNN and Fox. But I'm going to have to go ahead and end today's video. Now, this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the Vatican, the Holy See. Now, this is the Catechism of the Catholic Church, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. So I'm going to get ready to end today's video. Again, my name is Eric D. Johnson, also known as BrightShine. I reign the city of Memphis and the county, State of Tennessee. And thank all my fans, my support, team curve support. And always put God first. And always thank God for all the blessings and guidance that God provides us all with. Rejecting knowledge. Rejecting knowledge. Rejecting knowledge. Rejecting knowledge. The history of the city of Chicago, like world history, American history, all history is important. The Almighty, Vice Lord, Four Corner Hustle. The Almighty, Black Prince Stone. The Almighty, Black Disciple Poppin. The Almighty, Mickey Cobra, Crack. The Almighty Bluefin, Black Disciple, Black Disciple. The Lord Stone Disciple. 7-Eleven, G Killer. GD Killer. See, it's important. Till next time, you take care of yourself. Wish each and every one of you the very best.